So I'm not really good at keeping track of things. So I have no idea how many years we've been doing a jazz show. Jonathan McPants knows exactly how many years we've been doing a jazz show and a lot of other things that I don't know. But I really come to look forward to this in the course of my year. It's one of the days that I know I'm going to enjoy. And early on, we settled on one panel of 3 jazz savants, and they come back every year, and they've kind of, I think grown into each other's moves a little bit in terms of how we talk about stuff. So it's been a really interesting year. If you like vocals, we have more vocals than I think we usually do for our jazz show, and lots of polyrhythmic stuff and lots of piano trios. And you're just going to have a really good time right after this.
Bag of bones, homeward bound, unmotivated. Look around, you find your home in a bag of bones. A tethered mind is a sign of life's worth living now. You feel connected through the ground, but as you grow, you eat, you sleep, you know the ground way down below is where you will return. This bag of bones.
Is it possible for a song to be lyrical and morbid at the same time? Michael Mayo, who you hear here, is exploring that very question because it's time for our annual Our Favorite Jazz Records of the Year show. We don't call it Best in Jazz because we haven't listened to all, 4,000 jazz albums that came out this year. But when I say we, I really mean our panel. Jen Allen is a pianist, composer, arranger, and educator. Her most recent album is Sifting Grace. Noah Behrman is a pianist, composer, and educator. You see the little theme emerging here. His newest album for the Noah Behrman Trio is Live at the Side Door. Gene Seymour is the mayor of our jazz show, writer, professional spectator, pop culture maven, and jazz geek. They're all here. Actually, 2 of them are here. Gene's on by Zoom. But it's fun to have Jen and Noah back in the studios. And we're going to start with this particular artist, Michael Mayo. And Jen, this is one of your picks. So tell us what you're thinking.
Every year I have to make a list. I was telling Noah about this, and make a Spotify playlist of what am I thinking about best of jazz, not best of jazz, my favorite jazz, we'll just call it that, of the year. And it's very long. And when I heard this album, I just couldn't stop listening to it. And so I know that's something I really like. It's an intuitive thing. But Michael, first off, has a voice that is effortless. It just sounds like he's not efforting, and it's so peaceful and beautiful. But the compositions and the arrangements on the album are really great. They have interesting things about them. This one in particular, I love the rhythm. I love the arrangement. I think it doesn't get much more perfect than this in my mind. I really love it. I think the players are really terrific. You have Linda O.
She said she predicted she was gonna have problems recalling names.
Yeah, I have this written down because it's...
Well, while you're looking that up, let me just tell people a couple of things here. First of all, he's 32 years old. His parents were both session musicians. His mother was a backup singer. I think his father was a saxophonist, maybe. But they played with some really impressive people like Luther Vandross and Stevie Wonder and stuff like that. My favorite thing about Michael Mayo is that one of his early gigs was in a Shrek-themed jazz band called Shrek is Love. I don't know how you make that into a thing that you could just do more than once, but it was, he was in a Shrek themed.
I did not know
Yeah,
that.
jazz.
I think most of us probably would not be able to pull that off.
No,
but I don't think there's anything Michael Mayo can't pull off.
There might have been just 4 people in the world who could do that, and they all found each other. Do you have something else you want to add now?
Well, I just wanted to say that the album itself is really great because he does do a bunch of standards, but each of the standards are arranged in really unique ways. There's something about, especially being a musician, if somebody's just going to do a standard, I want to hear something really unique in there. I don't want to hear the same thing. And maybe the rest of the world does, but I don't. So anyway, This album is very unique, and I love it.
I'm really enjoying it. I love that cut a lot. Mr. Mayor, was he on your radar before all this?
He was not. The Shrek thing has my interest because I have known many ogres in the jazz world,
and some talking donkeys, donkeys as well, probably.
A lot of donkeys, present company excluded, obviously, but yeah, no, I'm intrigued. Listen, I mean, I love that kind of vocalizing. I also think it's very airy, and I think the word light too often gets a bum rap in this context because people think, well, if it's light, it can't be serious. It can't be, can't be taken seriously. But it's got my attention now, as Jen's picks often do.
Yes, absolutely. Noah, how about you?
So my wife, Kate, is a very discerning listener. And sometimes when I hear a new album that really stands out to me, I'll play it for her. And usually she's like, can we listen to something else? Sometimes she likes it and we get to the end. This one, she said, can we listen to more by this guy?
Yeah.
So I agree. He's just wonderful, and I can't wait for the next one.
Michael Mayo, the highest compliment. Let's hear some more. So we're going to move over to one of Noah's picks. This is Brenda Earl Stokes. The cup is Who Am I Now? This is from it's a concept album, sort of, called Motherhood. Noah, tell us a little bit about this.
It is very literally a concept album about motherhood.
Starting with conception.
Is starting, yeah. And her right. And her son is now 12, and I first encountered Brenda just as a pianist, didn't even know that she sang many years ago, and she's a wonderful singer too, but her writing is really evocative. The songs on this album are at times really cute and witty, and at times thought-provoking, at times really emotionally devastating, honestly. So be prepared to both laugh and cry when you listen to this one. And musically, it's wonderful. You hear her shredding on the piano a little bit there while her crew of singers, Nicole Zaritis and Melissa Stiliano, are singing along with her.
Inside of me, drive me away from all I have wanted for myself. How can I still be me?
Yeah, she's an artist worth paying attention to, and this a lot of years and a lot of heart went into this record.
Jen, listening to this song in particular, I thought, wow, if you told me this was from like an off-Broadway musical that was playing down at Barrow Street, but maybe going to move up to Broadway, I would have totally believed it. I went through her bio and I discovered she was an off-Broadway musical director, at least at one point. She's done like everything you could do probably at a piano. But what were your thoughts?
I appreciate this. I think the conversation just around being a woman in jazz and a mother in this world is finally like coming forward, and a lot of artists are doing this kind of thing. I mean, I had an album bunch of years back, Pieces of Myself, was kind of the same thing. I don't think I had the guts to say what it was really about, just because back in whatever that was, when my first album came out, it wasn't much of a conversation. And it was something that you had to kind of keep to yourself. And you just talk about music and kind of give it titles that are a little less in your face. So I think it's great that we're at this point and that she's making really great music with a different perspective than has ever been there before.
Mr. Mayor?
Trigger warning here for those who are going to flinch what I'm about to bring up, because in the context of this album, which I listened to all the way through, by the way, I am altogether for concept albums in jazz, especially, even though, as we have discussed outside of this forum, we wonder what an album is these days, but that's a whole other discussion. But the other thing I wanted to bring up, again, in the context of the last selection, I just finished watching the kind of sort of controversial documentary on yacht rock, and some of the various streams that have fed it, and it has fed in return. And I find it kind of encouraging in a weird way that the generation that probably dug that genre growing up as kids are finding a way to sort of bring the best of its elements, particularly the phrasing, the lyrics, all that stuff into this kind of jazz, this kind of thematic jazz, especially. I find it very, very encouraging. I don't know where it's all going to lead, but I think there's something there in what's happening with artists like these.
I mean, I think I know what you're talking about too, because listening to it, I was thinking, I mean, I think it's a little bit true with Michael Mayo too. You sort of think this is jazz, but it's almost not jazz. It's almost something else. It raises questions, I think, about, what a jazz vocal is and stuff like that. But good questions. And I like Mr. Mayer's concept that we're kind of like maybe always expanding our understanding of what this whole thing is. Sure. So let's go to one of your picks. This is a very young man, newcomer on the scene named Charles Lloyd. He's a mere stripling of 86, I believe. We're going to hear Balm in Gilead. Mr. Mayer, you still have the floor. Tell us about this.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the more I'll talk about heartening things in music. I think one of the very encouraging stories in jazz over the last 20 years is how Charles Lloyd, who had the closest thing to a kind of a rock star fame in the 60s, playing a very intense Coltrane-ish tenor saxophone and, of course, flute, and did these kinds of things that were always associated with flower power and things like that. And in the last, I think since the 90s, came back into prominence, bringing with him less torrent and a kind of a plaintive, soulful tone, much more akin, to my mind, to Miles Davis than to John Coltrane. What he's managed to do with this tone, with these particular elemental dynamics, is fashion these gorgeous albums with, by the way, one of the best working units around. Jason Moran on piano, Brian Blade on drums, and Larry Grenadier on bass. Just a gorgeous, and this particular album, this group's been working together for maybe the last 15 years. This feels like a culmination of sorts. It's a 2-disc set, and as I mentioned somewhere, the title, "The Sky Will Always Be Here Tomorrow," it feels kind of timely, even though it came out at the start of this year. You have Balm in Gilead, and you have other things, but just the whole album feels like a series of hymns to the present, secular hymns, and of course not so secular hymns to the present moment.
appreciate those thoughts, Gene. And it's interesting, one of my own biggest fountains of influence is a pocket of musicians who emerged out of Memphis in the early 60s, Harold Mayburn, George Coleman, Booker Little. And Charles Lloyd was part of that, this soul and gospel blues infused community, disciples of Finest Newborn Jr. And it's interesting hearing more of that in his latter years playing. And honestly, if he was just going on a nostalgia tour and, Forest Flower part, whatever, The Revenge, I'd be all for it, just that he's still around playing. But he really is bringing emotionally potent work to us still in his mid-80s.
I do want to just build on the Flower Power reference. Charles Lloyd, at one point, I think he was like living in Brian Wilson's house or something, but he was working with the Beach Boys somewhere around 70 or 71, and there's some stuff still out there. I don't think it's stuff that Charles Lloyd is eager to have preserved, but there is some stuff out there that represent collaborations between him and the Beach Boys, which is maybe not something you would have guessed. And Jen?
Yeah, the ability to play a melody like that beautifully, simply, and just with so much heart behind it, I think shows just, the maturity that he definitely has. And maybe that's the difference between being, earlier years of jazz playing and then kind of coming to this idea that you don't have to always play a ton to get that emotion out. And so I don't know, that's my 2 cents, but yeah, it's so beautiful. So, yeah.
There is some pretty virtuosic playing elsewhere.
Of course, yeah.
Too.
But in this one example.
This one is, I totally hear what you're saying. All right, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to bring the panel back. Each one of them, we should say, has picked 3 or 4, if you're going to listen to the podcast version, 4 cuts that we'll be talking about. So that's 12 on the day. We'll take a break. We'll come back. All right, so here we go.
Rock and roll.
No, jazz.
No, okay. Sorry. I forgot.
And you're hearing the David Murray Quartet. This is a song called Nino from the album Francesca by the David Murray Quartet. This is, by the way, in this segment of our jazz show, we're actually going to have 2 dog-themed songs. We didn't really plan it that way, but it's the way it's worked out. I should say, if you're just tuning in, our jazz panel, as they are every year for many years now, I've lost count. Jen Allen, Noah Behrman, Gene Seymour, all with us. Each one of them has picked their four favorite songs from the year, or songs from their 4 favorite albums of the year, or something. And that's what we're doing. We're talking about them. And this is a Gene Seymour pick. So, Gene, get us into it.
Well, I have to be very careful with my terminology here, but David Murray is simply one of the most prolific and protean, I guess that's the word, reed players of the last, 40, 50, 40 years. Just hundreds and hundreds of albums, many different groups. This got my attention this year, this particular one, because it's the first group I've heard him with in some time that's made the best use of framing, containing, and releasing his tone, which, as you can hear, is a very, very formidable tone. And he's again great backup, first-rate backup pianist Marta Sanchez. Luke Stewart on bass is a great band leader in his own right, and drummer Russell Carter. This particular song, the album is named after his Murray's wife, Francesca, who I think is a therapist or a psychotherapist, and she. One of the things she did in this track Nemo, she, as part of her administering some help to a friend of theirs in France, gave them this therapy dog named Nemo, and they just loaned this guy the dog for maybe a few months, and the dog proved to be such help that the guy said, "I want to keep him." So the dog basically stayed with this guy like forever, and maybe at least 10, 15 years, and then died. And Murray composed this tribute to him, which seems a little, as you say, seems a little trifling, but really the exuberance of this is such a tonic, and the whole album feels that way. It's very exuberant, more so than a lot of the work that Murray has done over the years. It's a really, really fun high.
I would hate for you to think that I thought dogs were trifling. My life is run by dogs. I mean, if it were up to me, we'd do 12 songs about dogs. So, yeah, Jen, it's interesting what he says, because the first thing I wanted to know is who that was playing the piano. There's that Marta Sanchez stuff. It's a very tight quartet, I think, and I kind of enjoyed how they played together.
Yeah, I love that. Actually, I hadn't heard this album before you put it on the list, so that's one of the great things about being on this show, is that I hear music that I've missed this year, so that was great to check it out. And yeah, Marta's a terrific pianist, but the rhythm section is very in sync, and I think that they're, as you said, very supportive of him, so yeah, it's a great album.
Noah?
Fun fact, I've seen David Murray perform live twice. Once was this past spring at Wesleyan, where he came with a Craig Harris, Sam Rivers tribute, and the other was in 1993 at Madison Square Garden, where he was playing with the Jerry Garcia band, having just replaced Clarence Clemens in that band. And I think that speaks to what Gene was saying about how there's a certain consistency to the fire that he spits out of his horn, which, at least as of this spring, he was still doing. And yet it gets recontextualized if he's playing in the World Saxophone Quartet versus in a stadium rock band versus in this remarkable quartet.
Yeah, I love this particular cut, too. I think it's just like all of us are kind of in love with it, I think. So we're going to go to one of Noah's picks from here. This is somebody straight out of Hartford, as they say in jazz. That's Alden Helmuth, the song Biting the Hand That Feeds You, from the album Good Intentions. So, Noah, I make this point every year. Say what you want about, I don't know, New York or Memphis or whatever. Hartford is the epicenter of jazz. I mean, this is like, it all starts in Connecticut. Let's say Hartford. Connecticut is the epicenter of the jazz universe. But tell us a little bit about this.
Well, it's funny you say that, because I very nearly picked Sarah Hanahan's debut record, which is also wonderful. And that one is very indicative of the Jackie McLean legacy. And Alden's record, which is equally wonderful, branches out a bit from that. You hear a bit more of the legacies of Anthony Braxton and Ornette Coleman. And it's wonderful as it is to hear the more sonically apparent J-Mac legacy through the music of anybody. It's great to hear this debut recording that has that, but branches out so creatively beyond that. It's really inspiring to hear the way she's finding a very personal sound.
I am once again abased to admit that this is the first time I encountered her. I went to hear her album, and yeah, I mean, obviously I heard her, I saw Hartford, and I thought, of course, Jackie McLean had some effect, but she has so much going on, as you say, in her playing, even that stretch we just heard. I heard Braxton, I even heard contemporaries like Emmanuel Wilkinson there, a lot of different things going on with her playing. And yeah, she's got chops. She's got potential.
Jen?
I've known Alden for a while, and it's nice to hear this because I actually haven't heard her play in a few years. So this was really fun. And speaking of hearing things in the music, I also heard like Branford, a little bit of that, like kind of. Yeah, she just has a lot of different.
You mean Branford Marsalis?
Marsalis, sorry.
As opposed to Branford, Connecticut.
Yeah, sorry.
So it could be very confusing because we're doing a whole Connecticut thing at the moment.
That's right. I got to be clear.
Branford, Connecticut can jam.
There is a Branford sound. There's no question about that. It's a little bit of
kind of salty.
Yeah, sea shanties are kind of woven into the jazz. Anyway, continue.
No, but this style, it's very uniquely hers with lots of influences. I always get a little upset when people start to say I sound like other people, but she has a very unique sound. But the band that she's put together to do this style, it's not easy. And it sounds so fluid. They sound like they're comfortable. They sound like they've been working together a lot. Again, I didn't know any of these musicians on the album, but it was nice to see how successful she's become. So yeah.
She's based in LA, is that right?
I think that's right, yeah.
She's currently a student in the Herbie Hancock Institute of Jazz, formerly the Monk Institute.
But also has her bachelor degree in music management from the Hart School. So I think there's the Hartford thing just keeps on going. All right, so I promised you another dog song. And we're going to give you another dog song. This is a Jen Allen pick. It's Dan Pugach Big Band, Travel. But this is, I think, also, it's fair to say, a concept album called Bianca Reimagined. Music for Pause, P-A-W-S, and Persistence. I got to say, Jen, I'm already kind of deeper into this album than I've been able to get to all 12. But and I'm just really, really loving this. But say a little bit more about this. I think there's some Connecticut connections here, too, aren't there?
Yeah, Dan lives in Connecticut. He's not from, but his wife, Nicole Reyes, is from Connecticut, and obviously they live both down in the Branford area.
And that's who you hear singing, by the way, is Nicole Reyes.
Yes, and this is actually her song, Travel, that was on her album that won her a Grammy last year for Best Vocal, Jazz Vocal. But Dan, I've known, I don't know how many years now, not too many, maybe since 2016 or something. I've known Nicole a long time, but I hadn't actually met him. And then we were in the BMI Jazz Workshop together, and just knowing his writing, and his compositions are great. His arranging and orchestration of things is really just so well done. And he's also Grammy nominated this year for this album. And I think that just one of those composers, I mean, being a big band composer and having a big band is such a lot of work and money and effort that anybody who can get it to this point and really continue, I mean, deserves an enormous amount of attention. And at this level, he's just doing it at such a high level. So I really appreciate this album.
My heart is full with the friends that I made, and better friends that I'll not be meeting. Yeah, there isn't a train that I wouldn't take, no matter where it's going. All night there isn't a train goes by, though the night is still for sleep and dreaming. But I see
And if it's not already clear, Dan and presumably Nicole foster and rehabilitate pit bulls. There was one named Bianca in particular, to whom he became very attached and came to gigs and rehearsals and stuff like that, and who passed. And this album is very much about that. But yeah, Noah, what do you have to say?
Yeah, this is my favorite big band record of the year too. He's really developed a sound. Even if he hadn't, even if it was just the pure level of labor and ambition, as Jen described, that goes with the insanity of conceiving and putting forth a big band record, that would be worthy of props alone. But he's really got a vibe.
I want to reemphasize what something Jen said. I mean, big bands are hard, which is why there don't seem to be as many making the rounds these days. And the commitment, just not just as a leader, but to write charts and have people who can write charts and be able to sort of keep everybody cohesive and to fashion a distinctive sound. That's work, and I'm impressed with the level of accomplishment here. I really am. Yeah, I mean, you say he's already won a Grammy?
No, he's nominated this year. I mean, his wife, he was on the album that, I guess he does. You get a Grammy if you're on the album, right? So his wife won one last year, but
I've got
he's nominated.
Grammys for all the albums that I've been on. Yeah,
he's nominated for this
standard.
for a big band.
No, it's great. It's great. It's great stuff. It really is, and I'm impressed, not just with the effort, obviously, but with what he's able to make from these elements.
I think they should give you a Grammy if you really listen carefully to somebody's album. Yeah. I think the audience is underappreciated, this whole award system here. All right, well, listen, we're going to grab a quick break here. We're going to come back with our wonderful panelists here, and we're going to tell you about 3 more songs after this. First of all, time to say some thank yous. The Maestro Dylan Reyes is with us today as our technical producer. Jonathan McPants is the person who produces this show every year, and that's what he is doing today. Our panelists are Jen Allen, pianist, composer, arranger, educator. Her most recent album is Sifting Grace. Noah Behrman, the pianist, composer, and educator. His newest album is from the Noah Behrman Trio, Live at the Side Door. If you're listening to the podcast, you're going to get to hear a little bit from that. Gene Seymour is writer, professional, spectator, pop culture maven, jazz geek, and mayor of the annual jazz show here. So this is a Jen Allen pick. It's Zakai Curtis. The song is Earl from the album Cubop Lives. All right, Jen, you have the floor.
What can I say about Zakai Curtis? Well, another Hartford musician. Surprise, surprise. But I mean, he's been a long time one of my most favorite pianists around, modern pianists. Definitely has that bebop tradition, and cubop, as he says, is kind of like a mix of like a bebop melody with an Afro-Cuban rhythm section. Mm-hmm. So all the songs on the album are like that. Some are his own compositions, like this one, which is called Earl for Bud Powell. And then there's some standards on there. But his skill, his ability to just kind of lead this band with his brother on bass and the sounds. Again, another Grammy-nominated album this year. And I'm really in awe of the stuff he's doing, and I really enjoy it. I love listening to this album.
And no, this is another Jackie McLean connection. He comes out of Jackie McLean Artist Collective School here in Hartford. But say more.
Right. I think he went on to Berkeley from there, started playing with Donald Harrison and Donald's nephew, who was then going by Christian Scott. And Zakai, if all he ever did was play Afro-Cuban jazz, he would have a secure legacy as an important musician of his generation. It's really wonderful how he does that. And not for nothing, he's also a great modern straight-ahead player. He plays on Avery Sharp's new record from this past year, which was well worth checking out as well. And even that doesn't mention his being at the helm of Truth Revolution Records, which, even if all he was a record company executive, would be a pretty significant contribution to our ecosystem.
Mm-hmm. And like so many of you, a professor. Did we say that yet? An educator, yeah. And including at the school that Dylan, the thing that he'll be famous for is he was a professor where Dylan Reyes went to school, our maestro. So, but yeah, Mr. Mayor, chime in here.
Well, this album buttresses the point I made in my own corner of the world that this year especially has been an outstanding one for piano trios. This year, I could literally tear off about a dozen. This is one of them. I mean, he has a lovely touch when it comes to this very rhythmic. Well, yeah, it's bop, okay, and I don't think you can say enough about the lasting, far-reaching influence of Bud Powell on almost everybody who's played in this format. But I love his sense of time. I love his sense of space. And when you have as many great piano trio albums, it's hard to stand out. But particularly if you decide you're going to do more or less straight ahead. But this guy really deserves more attention because of his approach and the way he makes it.
And I learned just sort of studying for the show, he's of both Black and Puerto Rican ancestry, and you can really hear both salsa and mambo and a lot of those kinds of sounds so much. I mean, even someone as untutored as I. Yes.
And I should point out, just to be extra precise, that while he is a great trio player, there are actually three percussionists rather than a drum set player on this particular record. So it evokes the piano trio sound. But for those looking up who the drummer is, you will be confused without that information.
So people who are...
it's a meta trio. How's that?
There you go. Yeah. I like that.
People who are even more confused now, let me just remind you, that's Zakai Curtis. The song is Earl from the album Q-Bop Lives. And now we're going to move on to a Noah pick. This is Monty Alexander, another youngster, new on the jazz scene, a mere 80 years old. And this is Aggression from the album D-Day by Monty Alexander.
So I decided to take a break from doing Kenny Barron records for the old guy still making great music category this year. And Monty is best known for various combinations, sometimes just one or the other, of Caribbean-influenced jazz. He's from Jamaica. And very straight-ahead swinging music in the sort of post-Oscar Peterson tradition. And you hear that swinging sound a lot on this record, but it's also, to me, one of the most conceptually rich records, possibly the most that he's made in his long career. Really fascinating to hear him digging into the thematic material while also playing his butt off and leading yet another wonderful piano trio.
So I have a good anecdote. So in 1961, he's a kid, but his family moves to Miami. He starts playing in a bar in maybe one of the big hotels there or something. And so Frank Sinatra and Jilly Rizzo, Jilly was Frank's, he was the guy that you wind up talking to if Frank was mad at you. I mean, you didn't want Jilly to pay you an unannounced visit, but also, very... his own little kind of figure in the entertainment world. Anyway, they're at the hotel because there's the Frank Sinatra imitator there. Why Frank Sinatra is going to see a Frank Sinatra imitator, I do not know. And I don't want to know. But somebody goes up to them and goes, there's this kid who's really swinging the room over in the bar. So now that you've seen the Frank Sinatra imitator, why don't you go in? And they went in and they agreed that he was amazing. And he got an invitation in 62 to go to New York City and become the house pianist for Julie Rizzo's nightclub and restaurant, which is simply called Julie's.
Which he made a record about subsequently. Monty did, not Frank.
Right. I'm sure there's some really interesting stories that probably can't be on the liner notes of that record or even uttered aloud. But it's a pretty fascinating thing. So now I've lost track of where we are. Jen, why don't you go next and talk about it?
I was so grateful this was on the list because, again, I hadn't heard this one, but now I've been listening. This is the one I've been digging the most out of all the ones that I just learned about. Yeah, oh my gosh, so swinging. And not only that, being a pianist, I'm always listening for things that, stand out to me and make that person a unique pianist. But he has some real isms that make him so unique that, like, he'll just play up high on the piano in this interesting way that nobody does, but somehow he gets away with it and makes it sound amazing. And anyway, it's super swinging. I love this album, and I can't wait to listen to it more.
Yeah, I was interested that you said post Oscar Peterson, because I think maybe my first jazz album was an Oscar Peterson two disc vinyl album, and I hear some Oscar here when he plays.
Yeah,
absolutely,
totally.
And the only thing I really have to add to this is that I'm always astonished by his energy, just his level of energy that he puts into every single phrase he plays, because he is so rhythmically tight. Even if he's not, even there didn't have to be any percussion at all, and you could just sort of swing with what he is doing within a given phrase. He has so much going on, and think about it, but once again, it bears repeating that if you can hang in there with this music for, long time, it can sustain you well past your 80th birthday, and not just as a player, but even as a listener. So,
my other tidbit is that he and Miles used to like to go to boxing matches together. All right, so we're going to be ending the broadcast version of the show here pretty soon, but I do want to say that those of you who are listening to the podcast, don't go anywhere. We have more for you, and if you're listening to the broadcast, maybe you should go to the podcast and find out the other 3 songs we talk about. Patricia Brennan Septet is going to be the last one we play here, though. This is a pick by Mr. Mayer, Gene Seymour. This is Palo de Oros from Breaking Stretch by the Patricia Brennan Septet. Mr. Mayer, I was interested in knowing where we were going to start this song, because it's one of those songs that really, has movements to it almost. But say a little bit more about this artist and about why you like this album.
Patricia Brennan is a vibraphonist and
Marimbist.
Yeah.
Marimbist, I guess. Okay. And she's from Veracruz, Mexico. She's already proven herself on her previous albums to be very, very adroit and even kind of scarily virtuosic as a vibes player. But she has decided with this septet to place her vibes totally in the center of what amounts to this vortex of brass and percussion. you could almost sense that she's somehow controlling all of this in some way, and it's a fascinating way to orchestrate this kind of sound, which yes is Latin, but it's also so many things. It's also kind of avant-garde, but not really. It's also very accessible. It has all kinds of things going on. I wrote that this is the kind of album that needs to have weather advisories posted to it.
Absolutely true. Actually, I went to see a marimbist recently, and my health insurance did not cover it. I had to pay out of pocket for basic marimbist treatment. So yeah, and we should, I don't know if we said this, she's from Veracruz, Mexico. So Jen, tell us a little bit about what you thought.
Funny, I'd never heard of her. Shame on me. But I think it just speaks to how vast this little niche jazz community is. Is that, I don't know, it's much bigger than I ever think. There's always people I've never heard of. And this album's going to take me a lot longer to listen to. It's not the same as like some of my picks where I could easily digest it. This one's going to take a lot more critical listening for me, because this stuff is really high quality, and I have just barely touched into listening this album, so I don't have as much to say as I'd like.
All right, and Noah?
Yeah, it's an intense piece of work. So I think the mayor said most of what I would say. I want to shout out how amazing the band is, and we got to hear a bit of soprano sax playing there by John Arabagon, who put out at least 4 albums this year, and which are only available on Bandcamp, which I'll shout out for those of you who are so inclined to actually spend a little bit of money to support artists and labels as you listen to music. Bandcamp is the place to do that. But yeah, the whole band is great, and it really is interesting for me, having paid more attention to her vibes playing than her writing up until this record, to hear how that voice is expanding.
Yeah, and as I say, this song itself it goes a lot of different places, and there's a little part of it that could have been almost from Zakai Curtis or something. All right, so we are going to be wrapping up the broadcast, a part of this show, and with Noah and Jen and the mayor, Gene. But as I say, the podcast will continue. Don't go anywhere. We're going to talk about 3 more cuts right after this.
To me you were, and then you slowly slipped away, an angel of the night and of the day. Our time has come, but will you ever return to love's arms? No eyes ever seen, no ears ever heard, no minds ever thought, no hearts ever sung love still, a never-ending melody. Visions of a world of beauty, passions overflowing, and reflections of the memories, the questions left behind. Reality's a dream and truth a lie. Just as I close my eyes and pray for escape, I see your face. but sure as the sun, dark as the moon, swift as the breeze, together soon
This is Samara Joy. I'll just sort of jump in here and say that the only part of this whole thing that I probably know a little bit about is singing. There's a handful of singers who could just do what you just heard, and it's a pretty small handful. I mean, the amount of breath control and note control and stuff like, I mean, it's really kind of startling. It's just virtuosic all by itself. Samara Joy, we should say, this isn't the first time she's been shouted out on one of these shows. She is clearly here to stay as she's kind of the it singer right now, I think, within the world of jazz, and somebody who's really successfully crossed over to a different audience as well. But this is one of your picks, Mr. Mayor, Gene Seymour. So tell us more about this.
Well, to bring up the G word once again, as in Grammy, she is one of the few people to not just get Grammys for jazz singing, but she was also given a Grammy for Best New Artist, crossing all the different genres, which is very rare. And when you heard what you just heard, you understand how rare she is, because this album is kind of a follow-up to the last one she did, which was, a very accomplished, let's put it that way, set of standards. She also is very adroit at writing lyrics to instrumental standards, which she did on the last album as well. This particular tune you just played is a Charles Mingus tune called Reincarnation of a Lovebird, which never had lyrics before this. And as she's singing, you think, and as she's bending and raising and rising and falling and soaring all over the place, you realize she's doing this with the words she just came up with. And, as I'm listening to it, I found myself just wincing and whistling to the whole thing all over again, like I heard it for the first time. I don't want to make too much of it, because I think that it's easy to be wowed by virtuosity, particularly in vocals, because you think, well, yes, she's amazing, but is she any good? Yeah, she's that good as well as amazing, as the rest of the album bears out.
Yeah, and I have some thoughts about this. Noah and I may get into it at some point. But Jen, what are your thoughts about Samara Joy at this point?
I want to get into it too.
Okay, we're all going to get into it.
No, I mean, it's pretty, and it's nothing to debate that she's an amazing vocalist and musician. I think that she is, at a very young age, very accomplished, and this album itself has a lot of great arrangements on it, and the band sounds great. So that's like another side of just her, obviously her amazingly beautiful voice. I mean, there's something about a beautiful voice that I think just stops people in their tracks. I mean, we've seen this in all genres, right? If somebody just has such a great gift, but also has used that gift and kind of worked at it, which she has, I think we all do have to stop and kind of be in awe of that. It's really just, I think it's just human nature to do that. But the album itself has some great arrangements and of standards, and I think there's some originals on there as well. I didn't recognize the name of a couple of them, but I didn't look up who they were by. So,
well, this gets into what Owen,
is that what you guys were talking about?
Noah and I were talking about, and we're emailing about this, and I'm sort of just intrigued by. First of all, we should say this. What she's doing is what I think a lot of jazz vocalists do, which is get a little jazzier each time. At the beginning, you want to be kind of Jane Monheit. You want to be sort of playing stuff that people know, because people like to hear jazz standards. That's why they're jazz standards. And so, yeah, she opens this album with You Stepped Out of a Dream, but pretty quickly after that, she's off to the races. And it's just an interesting thing, right? I mean, you could have a really good career just playing music written in the 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s, and no one will ever complain if you're a good singer. But most jazz singers they get restless. And this year, like Jasmine Horn has an album that's all originals. Venetia Gold has an album that's all originals, because some jazz singers want to write too. But Noah, you know so much more about this than I do, so I should stop babbling.
Well, no, you're not babbling. I mean, I guess to me, essentializing a person as a jazz singer, you know, a jazz singer is a thing that a person can do if they've earned that credential, so to speak. And for some people, that's the beginning and the end of it, and that's all they wanted to be. And they, in fact, view that as mutually exclusive to being some other kind of singer or having some other kind of artistic, never mind beyond artistic identity. But, you know, most artists are complicated humans, as most of us humans are, and they want to do the things that stimulate them and that challenge them and that are genuinely expressive of who they are, which might not be who they were exactly 5 years ago. And I guess what I've observed in my decades of doing this is that there's a certain organic quality to how people develop and what they get into musically that may change, and it may butt up against what the commercial demands are of whoever is bankrolling their music and so on. But yeah, it's difficult to predict, and it's interesting. I find it fascinating anyway, how we as fans of the music can develop certain preconceptions of what someone is. It's this near universal phenomenon that we get attached to an artist and then they move on and do something different, and we either love it or hate it, but it's based on our sort of proprietary sense that no, this is what you should be doing. You did this thing, I liked it, why aren't you doing that? Or you're doing this thing that's better, thanks for doing that. And as if we had any reason to be confident that we had correctly identified that person's artistic spirit and ethos in the first place.
Yeah, and Mr. Mayor, I feel like I'm part of the problem more than part of the solution. I mean, do I really need to hear another version of Mountain Greenery? Not really, but if you want to get me started, if you want to give me an on-ramp, maybe some Rodgers and Hart or Jerome Kern or something. It's sort of a good place to start to get to know me, and I get to know you, and then an album or two down the road, you could start doing some other stuff.
I have no problem whatsoever with doing the standards thing at all, and they're some of my, this sounds patronizing, some of my very favorite singers are standard singers, and I don't mean it that way exactly, but the thing that kind of scares you a little bit about Samara Joy is that this is the kind of virtuosity that you can easily see bending and growing as she ages. This is the kind of talent that I don't even know if I would call it talent. This is the kind of charmed vision that promises to get grow more dimensions as she grows more dimensions. I mean, that's the thing, that this is base level for her right now. She's just starting. And that's part of what kind of gets your heart racing when you hear her do stuff like this.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think, Cassandra Wilson's done an interesting thing all along, and she sort of said, I'm going to just do Cassandra Wilson things. And if I do Wichita Lineman, I'm going to do a Cassandra version, of Wichita Lineman. I don't know. Back to you, Jen.
I mean, I just think that this is like a very tenuous subject, just because we get to the point where we're talking artistry versus what sells and what labels want, and like what the audience will take, and what Samara ends up doing will be what Samara does. And that doesn't mean that she's doing it wholly artistically. It might be because the label wants her to do certain things. It might not. I won't have any knowledge of that, but I think vocalists in particular have a very strong pressure to do something that maybe the audience wants or the label thinks will sell. And there's nothing wrong with that. Some people will stay there, but I think you made a good point with someone like Cassandra Wilson. I think certain people will end up doing what they do. Sometimes it's the standards and sometimes it's originals. I like to think that people in the audience, they're flexible and they love to be challenged. That's how I want to see my audiences. I don't want to see that we have to dumb it down and just give them the same old, same old.
Although,
that's my opinion.
to paraphrase H.L. Mencken, nobody ever went broke underestimating the flexibility of the American music audience.
I mean, the best case scenario, I think, is, and you see some artists who have embodied this. I think of Bill Frisell, who put out a great record this year. I think of Bobby McFerrin. People who somehow Yo-Yo Ma cross that threshold where their brand is their restless creativity and exploration, and whatever they want to do is what the audiences want to hear, rather than having that sort of conundrum of whether to choose sincerity or commercial viability.
Yeah. No, Yo-Yo Ma could just say now, I'm going to do a whole album of Led Zeppelin covers. And the label's going to go, fine, good. Absolutely. Let us know when it's done. All right, we got to get off this and move on here a little bit. We're going to move on to Tyshawn's Sorry Trio. This is a Noah pick. It's called Parasina from the album The Susceptible Now. I just want to say a little internal story, which is that every once in a while there's some kind of awards competition and are we going to enter the show? And I've taken to saying in recent years, I'm mainly playing for my obit right now, so if it's not a Pulitzer or a MacArthur grant, don't even bother. This particular artist has a Pulitzer and a MacArthur grant. But Noah, tell us more.
And he, of all of the musicians I've met, worked with, he is the one person I can think of who is literally a genius. And so the MacArthur is fitting. And most of the music that he has been lauded for is pretty, to jazz audiences anyway, pretty far out and maybe on the fringes of the jazz tradition. But he's always had a great devotion to that tradition. And this series of trio records that he's been making, featuring Aaron Deal on piano, Tyshawn's a drummer and composer, it's all explorations of tunes from the jazz canon, often less commonly played one. This is a great McCoy Tyner tune. And all of these performances are pretty lengthy, and so I encourage people to check them out just to hear how they develop the music, the interactivity of the band, but especially this walking the line between reverence for the tradition and being personal and of the moment in interpreting the material.
This one I think is about 14 minutes long, and I never got bored, and I have the attention span of a housefly. So that's how you get a MacArthur Genius Grant, I get. Yeah, I guess. Yeah, Jen, to talk a little bit.
I think you described that really well. Just that the development of these pieces was kind of exciting to me. You know, like they're not done in a standard way, but they have such depth to them. It's like hearing a master at a really kind of rather young age. And he had a bunch of albums this year, too. He had like a couple other ones. I mean, the funny thing is this was not on Spotify. This was on Apple Music or whatever you were saying,
Bandcamp
Tidal or something.
I got it on Tidal, too.
And I never used Tidal. Anyway, Spotify was not on there, but I was looking at other ones, and he had a bunch of other ones that were out this year.
Or at least things he was on. He was on Vijay Iyer Trio's record with Linda, and that one's wonderful, too.
Yeah. So anyway, this is all to say, great. And another trio album. There's a lot of trio albums this year on our list. But
a lot of vocals this year, too.
And a
right?
lot
More
of vocals,
than
yeah.
typically have. All right, Mr. Mayor.
Well, the thing I keep going back to when I think of this album is that, you know, it's led by a composer. And these interpretations are those that are guided along by a composer. And that means that he is, and what's interesting and fascinating about this trio is that they keep finding ways to sort of reinvent along the way. I mean, that's what you're supposed to do when you do jazz, right? But they become somehow bigger. I listened to the original McCoy Tyner recording again, just as a matter of comparison, and there's just so much that he manages to sort of to broaden and to expand on. Not just here, but there's a Joni Mitchell tune he does, which Joni Mitchell wrote the lyrics for. Charles Mingus, Chair in the Sky. But once again, I mean, he dives in, and from his seat at the trap set, he's able to kind of reconfigure these things into grander works. And I think that's what makes this unit. That's what has made this unit in a field that's, as you say, the piano trio field is crowded right now. That's what's made this particular group stand out among the rest.
Well, speaking of piano trios, we're down to our final cut. This is an artist I do not know. Noe Biermont. I don't know. Is that how you say it? I don't know how to pronounce it. This is a Jen Allen pick. It's Caravan. Of course, it's Noah Behrman from the album Live at the side door, the Noah Behrman Trio. That's the side door down in Old Lyme, Connecticut. So, yeah. Jen, tell us why you nominated this obscure, unloved artist. I
know. I didn't pick this because he's sitting next to me. I picked this because literally when this came out in the summer, I think late summer, something like that, and actually, I'll say before that, I heard him at a live concert, probably last winter or early spring. And I was like, dang, Noah, you keep getting better. What's going on? Like, he just keeps sounding better and better. And then I heard this album and I was like, yes, I love how he plays original pieces. And I love how you interpret the standards. They're unique. They have an energy that is, you're going for something and you're unafraid, and your skill, again, it amazes me. And I was kind of regretting that I said started at this point, because like about 5 or 6 minutes in, he's playing two hands, unison line, killing it, like just screaming. And I'm like, man, his left hand too. What the heck? Like, it's just a lot of skill, musicality, energy. I really enjoy this album.
Oh, shucks.
I must say, whoever this pianist is, I do like the way he kind of steps into this thing. I mean, and leans. I mean, at the very start of the solo. That's why I can easily see how people got excited. You mentioned the drummer. I really like the bass line too.
Is that Henry Lugo? Is that your
it
bass?
is,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it's a live album. Let me just say that.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yes, it is. Okay. I thought maybe there's some guys in the studio who were just kind of. But no, I shouldn't say this. It was nothing he does surprises me as far as this stuff goes. And just to support what Jen said, I mean, he really knows how to sort of raise the game as he's into it. I mean, in the middle of it. I mean, as you say, when he dives deeper into it and he does all those things. And I guess I need to ask the question to this pianist: does the audience make you do that, or do you just decide, okay, I'm going to see if I can get a rise out of them? Do you respond to the room and
It's
decide.
a great question.
It is a great question. I think the honest answer, which if you'll forgive me is a little more nuanced, is that because of Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, I'm very conscious that I have a finite amount left in the tank. And so every time I get to play for an audience that's that supportive, and you could hear Ken Kitchings, the irrepressible and wonderful owner of the Side Door Jazz Club, who's an important figure in our ecosystem. But when there's that level of enthusiasm, it becomes clear that this is a place to expend some of what's left in the tank. And I don't know when I'm going to have to pack it up, hang up my cleats, so to speak. But there's no point in playing inhibitedly to prolong that. I want to leave it all on the court, and an audience like that makes it a no-brainer to do so.
I need to go to that club. I need to go.
I have a gift certificate. Want to go with me?
Sure.
Yeah, I'll buy your drinks.
Anytime.
All right, so we have to say goodbye right now. And first of all, thanks to everybody who worked on the show, and thanks to Noah Behrman, thanks to Gene Seymour, Jen Allen. Thanks for listening this year. This is so much fun. We can't wait to see you guys next year.